Hi friends, I'm Jesse from ShrinkRC.com. I'm here to show you one of my newest builds, which has actually taken a while because I had it sent out to be painted, had it sent back, and just been taking a little bit longer time on this one than I normally do. But this is an RC four-wheel drive Scottsdale. And this came as a ready to run. It was actually one of the blue trucks. And I decided to turn it into a dually. And here's the result. So these are the Shrink RC dually fenders. These are what's known as the double wides. We have single wide and double wide. And it just depends on what kind of build you're going for. The single wides are pretty true to a real life one-to-one Scottsdale dually from this era. And the double wides are twice as wide. And I do that because when you're doing a four-wheel drive type build like this, or even in some cases some of the slammed builds, you want to have that wider fender if it's the slam build so the tires can tuck up inside, or in the case of the four-wheel drives, the tires are so wide and the axles are wide that if you're not going to narrow the rear axle, you wind up with your tires sticking out of the sides if you use the standard width dually fenders. So in this case, I wanted the tires to be within that distance so that it sort of matched up. And that's why I used the double wide fenders. And I'll show you some more views of that in a minute. One thing that's interesting about those dually fenders is we used to offer them in the store printed so that you could order them in both widths. And one of the things that's changed lately is I have a few parts that I'm no longer going to make, and instead I'm going to offer the 3D files for them. So if you go to ShrinkRC.com, go to the 3D files page, and you can see some of the things that I'm now offering as 3D files, no longer offering as printed parts. And the dually fenders are one of those items. Both widths are available on there for purchase. And I wanted to bring out a couple of other little things that are now available for purchase on there. My truck stands are one of the items that you'll find on there now. This here is the version that is for portal axles with 4.75 tall tires, and that's why this one is so tall. So if you have any tires that are larger than 4.19, or if you're running portals with any size tire, really, obviously if you have portals you probably have a decent sized tire, you're going to want to go with the portal height version. If you have straight axles on any rig with 4.19 size tires, there's a shorter version which I've got this truck sitting on right now. And you can see that with the 4.19s I leave just enough room for the tires to be right off the shelf, so it kind of looks like your rig is hovering on the shelf. These are smaller than 4.19 tires on this rig. So are these ones. I don't have a good one with 4.19s on there. Here you can see some great big old tires. These are the Vanquish tires that are they're like, I can't remember how tall. They're really tall. I think they're full 5 inches. But that's a straight axle. I've got it on the portal axle version, which is these ones. Another item that's now in the store is a hood cowl. And you can see here, this is the tall hood cowl that we have on there. I can't remember if I call it the double height, but this is designed to be molded into your hood and then sanded and painted and blended all in. You could see this on my video with the green TRX4 truck that was converted from a Blazer into a K10. That's actually this hood scoop, and this is another item that's now available in the 3D portion of our store. And I have a few of these left to sell, but mostly these are going to be converted over to the 3D files now. By the way, a side note on that, I noticed that RC four-wheel drive recently came out with a hood that has a hood scoop already built into it. So if you don't feel like doing all the work of gluing this on and sanding it, blending it in, you still have to paint the RC four-wheel drive, but you can be saved all that trouble of having to blend it all in and everything. And that's really an attractive option to a lot of people. I have seen a few people comment, and I thought that the hood scoop on the RC four-wheel drive version where it's all integrated, that it looks a little bit narrow to my eye, and a couple of other people agree with me. So if you'd like a wider hood scoop than the one they offer, then you can start off with a flat hood and get our hood scoop and blend it all in, and you'll have one that's got that wider look to it. This is offered as a 3D file, of course, as I mentioned. I also have one offered now that is half of this height. So you can split this in half. So kind of like one's about a 3-inch height, and I would call this one about a 6-inch height in the 1-to-1 world. So, or maybe this one's about a 5-inch height in the 1-to-1 world, and the other one is about a 2.5-inch height. And then there's also sort of a wee little baby one that just goes back in this back section here. It was kind of a custom scoop that was available for a while, and I made that for a friend who was building a tribute truck for a friend of his, and he asked me to make that small one, and it actually came out looking really good. So that's offered in the store as well. There's 3 different versions of the hood scoop that you can get. Obviously, those all require being molded in. So let me set that aside for a minute, and let's talk more about this particular rig. I've got the RC 4-wheel drive dually wheels on here with glue-on tires. I think these wheels are called the Double Trouble, and I don't have my glasses on. I'm trying to remember which. I think I've got Baja Claws on here, and these are some 4.19 Baja Claws. In the rear, I've got basically stock foams, and by doubling up the tires, there's enough pressure in them to keep the tires at the right height. In the front, things were getting so heavy that with the stock foams, it was kind of crushing those tires up in the front. So I went with some Crawler Innovations dual stage foams, and if I remember correctly, I went with the mediums. They feel like probably the mediums. I don't think they're the hard option, and those wound up getting that front to sit about where it's supposed to. There's a couple of items on this truck that were actually made by friends of mine for me. This was made by my friend Nolan Verde Scale. He offers different toolboxes for. He has them for the Chevys, he has them for Toyotas. He has the kind that go with a lip that goes up over the side rail, and then, you know, in a couple of different heights. And then this one's the kind that's meant to go flush down inside like that. So it's a cool toolbox in there, and it's got room to fit a nice 2-cell lipo in there, and it comes with a hole in the bottom of it. So if you want to make a hole in your bed, you can change your batteries without taking the body off. Drop your lipo in there. Run the wire up from your ESC so that it's sitting exposed in here. You plug your battery in, drop the battery in, and obviously you'd want to have this glued down or double taped down into the bed. I'm going to take out, let's see, let me show you what's going on in here. If you look in here, oh, this whole body was painted by Slow Crawler, and he is on Instagram. He is a professional automotive painter in the real world, and this is automotive grade paint. This isn't like Tamiya paint or something like that. This is the real automotive paint. He's out in Texas. I sent this out to him, and he had it for a minute and did all the body work on it, painted it up. He put real bed liner in here. I've been asked, well, how did we get the bed liner look in here? It's bed liner. Now, the other thing that you can see in here is a Shrink RC bed mat. And the bed mats are also available at shrinkrc.com. Oh, now I've got this off the stands. Here's the difference between the 4.19 stand straight axle and portal axle up to 4.75. Let me take out this bed liner. Obviously, I've got Shrink RC body mounts on this truck. A lot of people don't know we make body mounts for TF2 and TF2 long wheelbase chassis. We started off making body mounts for mashups, but people started asking me, hey, why don't you make them for the TF2s? And I said, well, why would you want one for a TF2? They come with them. I said, well, they didn't really like the way there was just little sticks that come out of the side of the frame to hold the body. So let me show you what our mounts look like. And there you can see that's what our body mounts look like for the long wheelbase versions. On the short wheelbase, meaning the 4Runner and the Mojave 2-door, it's a shorter piece that just kind of goes under the cab. But on these, as you can see, it's sort of a full-length thing. Another thing about the body mounts from RC 4-wheel drive is, I showed you this a minute ago, but the ones that come with it have posts, like old-fashioned body posts and clips, which isn't that clean of a look. So what you do with Shrink RC mounts is those body posts and clips come off, and then there's a nice little rigid piece that goes under there with threaded stainless inserts. You screw that down, and then that screw just sits down nearly flush, and it's a little bit cleaner look. This is one of our bed mats in here, and these come in handy for a couple of things. You might just want one because you want one. and they're offered with and without these holes in them. So some people want it without the hole, and they're not going to run a body mount on the bed portion, and they just want to have it all cleaned out so you don't see any holes. And another thing that this is nice for is if you've made holes in your bed and they didn't come out very clean, and for example, for shock towers on another linked type chassis, well, you can take this, you can cut this with a mat knife and a ruler and get your holes super clean on here, drop this in and clean up your bed. In this case, I actually test fitted this body on a VRD chassis, and the VRD chassis doesn't have removable shock towers. The shock towers are integrated into the rails, so I needed to cut the body in order to check it on those frame rails. So I went ahead and cut that. I did my test fitting. This is actually a cool rig on the VRD. To me, it fits really well on there. And I don't always go for the flat rail chassis, but when I put this one on the flat rail, it was kind of cool. So you can see you have the holes in there from those shock towers. Drop that in. Everything looks nice and clean. Let's see, what else did I have to show you on this guy? A lot of this truck is pretty stock. I don't have the emblems on here, and I lost the tailgate latch, so I'm going to need to get another tailgate latch or something and print one out or buy one. They're like $10, and I'll get that on there. But otherwise, other than the paint job, and the paint job's not cheap, just so you know. Tom is, like I said, he's a real automotive painter, so we did some trading, and he got something nice, and I got this nice paint job. Now, speaking of friends doing stuff, check this out. This is one of our bench seats, which I haven't gotten around to putting in yet. But this is real leather, and this is Rhino Head RC did this. He's also on Instagram. He painted this with a Tamiya paint color that was my request for that color. And then he went and he upholstered the seats with real leather. And this thing is so impressive to me. So I haven't got around to putting it in the truck. I was planning to put it in this truck. Not 100% sure if I will now, but and in fact I have the door panels out because I was planning to paint them to match it. But this is just something really cool that you can do with our bench seats. Bench seats are also available at shrink-rc.com. I'm not selling the 3D files for those at this point, just the printed seat. You have to assemble this out of 4 pieces, and the nice thing about that is he took advantage of that by, when the pieces are separate, you can put the upholstery on here, then glue it all in together, and it hides the seams of the upholstery. But this to me is one of the nicest things I've ever seen done with a Shrink RC part. I just love this bench seat. You can see that the tire is aligning just like it did from the factory back here, which isn't quite in the center of the wheel well. Now when it's compressed, watch what happens to the leaf spring as it compresses. See how that lines up to the wheel well when it compresses? And that's because with leaf spring chassis, the length of the wheelbase actually changes as the suspension compresses and unloads. So it gets longer. I can't even see it from that side, but I know what's happening. That tire is moving back when I go like this. So that's why when it's sitting static, it looks like it's not quite lined up. That is the way they come from the factory. That's also why when you're doing conversions using any other brands of chassis with RC four-wheel drive bodies, if you look at my instructions on the website, I have instructions for all the different builds on the website, but it always tells you to get some longer rod ends in the rear to move the rear tires out a little bit longer. And you wind up with a little bit longer than 12.3-inch wheelbase in reality to get your tires in the back to line up correctly to the fender wells, because these fender wells are more than 12.3 inches apart, and that's because of this phenomenon that happens when you compress the leaves. I just remembered another thing is I've got the really tall lift blocks in this. I swapped them out. I had a new chassis. It was the Rust Bucket Edition Blazer, and I swapped out the lift blocks. That Rust Bucket has the really tall super lift blocks on it, so I took the shocks and blocks off of that, put them on here, and I took the sort of medium height ones that were on here, and I put them on the Rust Bucket. And that's actually another build I'll talk about later, because that has a whole different body on it now and everything. So there's that truck. That's what those tires and rims look like on there. The interior is still mostly stock at this point. Just wanted you to see this build. Thanks for watching. Everything's available at shrinkrc.com. Thanks.